Perfect. And hi guys, I am Paul Sullivan. I am the founder of Digital Bias. We are a HubSpot gold partner and an agency that focuses on SaaS and tech here in the UK and the US. And today,
account-based marketing 1. And with me, we have Fawn Hudgens,
who is the former VP of Marketing at Datamaran, ESG platform, and also former VP of Content. I think that's Global VP of Content for Money 2020, the world's most influential fintech event. And joining us at some point during the session will be Robert Norham, who is a B2B marketing and ABM expert who's worked in marketing for over 30 years and focused on ABM for over a decade, well before it became a buzzword. And he's developed ABM for the likes of Oracle, Vodafone, and a slew of other tech companies that you might want to know. So I'm very much looking forward to the conversation with both Fawn and Robert. Welcome to the UK SaaS HUG.
Hello. Nice to see everyone and nice to be here.
Good. So Fawn, the reason that you're here is so that we can give people the background into what it's like to run ABM internally and work with external agency partners. So hopefully that story plays out there. But today we really want to go through what it takes to build an ABM strategy. There's lots of info out there on one-to-one or one-to-many, but this is the inside look from a company and client. You're a former client. And perhaps you could start us out by talking about how you embarked on your ABM journey.
Yes, perfect. So to set the scene, it was a really interesting time to be coming into the business because they had just completed a Series A to focus on sales and marketing in particular. So, they really didn't have much of the foundations in place. So it was interesting to come in and kind of build those. They were open to ABM. They had a basic understanding of it. I had several people say, oh, well, we've done it. We've done these case studies. And I was like, a bit, but not quite. And I knew enough about ABM going in that I believed it to be one of the strategies that we needed in our toolbox to hit the targets that we had been presented, which I thought were achievable with the right strategies and focus and resources in play. So I presented this as part of the mix of strategies that I thought we would need in the first week that I was there, and it was a resounding yes. But crucially, yes doesn't mean go, because before we could begin, as I mentioned, there was a lot of foundational elements that had to be put into place, and they're fundamental for, I think, anyone who wants to do good marketing in general, but, particularly ABM. So the first thing was, re-looking at our product market fit. So I think particularly in a startup, you're really busy just building your presence, building your client base, developing your product, your service, and you don't often stop and say, is this message, is what we're putting out there still fit for purpose? So we had to pause. We had to do, a competitor analysis again. We had to talk to our customers, because I think a lot of times what we think is like a cool feature or, really valuable isn't always the case when we talk to customers. And so we have to get into their heads. And so that meant revisiting our positioning and messaging, our story formatting. And, that really helped play a part into, our ABM journey. We also had to look at our personas. We, again, had an idea about them, but we hadn't done the proper work, done a workshop, talked to customers, etc. So we developed those. And then, a huge piece of work was our ideal customer profile and kind of building an ICP list to really focus on. And Paul, I know you can speak to that because you really helped us with that.
Yeah, I think what was really good about working with you guys, was that your ICP was like really high value, right? It was billion-dollar companies, the top 8,000 companies in the US. And from that perspective, that made it hard enough as it was. But within ESG and not having identified the proper roles of your personas, and just going off of a standard list of personas, of job titles, was really difficult, because ESG seems to be one of these burgeoning areas where people just come in and someone is like the leader of ESG and something else and something else and something else within North America. And like, so there was no like standardization.
It wasn't
and
like CMO, head of marketing, you know, which is really clear and straightforward.
Exactly. And then, you know, to underpin the way that we were thinking about going to market, and obviously the platform that you were working with, it had the platform at the heart of the campaign. Like, it was going to be its own best use case,
Yeah.
which I think was like a real good opportunity for us, a great opportunity for the company. But that meant we had to figure out how to present that in a way that would capture the eye and the understanding of the people that we were trying to sell to in companies that really didn't want to talk to people like us, right? So that was really important. But just for like the guys on the call, we put in over 100 hours, like man hours of research to get to the halfway point. So that was identifying good fit ICP off the back of the best fit deals that were taking place inside the company's CRM. That meant then going to LinkedIn, going to the company page, looking for the ESG leaders, coming back to the business and finding out which ESG leaders were the right ESG leaders, right? So even within that, it wasn't just if there was ESG in the title that they were the right ESG leaders to talk to. Actually, it was particular ESG leaders within the organization that you needed to find.
And also, as part of our ICP, we needed to see if they even had a sustainability report. Like, is sustainability even on their radar? So that was another kind of thing that you had to go and research. So it was intense. And then there was the education piece. So I knew that I couldn't go into this business and say, right, we're going to do this thing and we're just going to do it. Like, it was going to be a process. And if I didn't have the education that I needed, I wasn't going to be able to sell this internally. So I went on an intensive course that Robert taught. So full circle here. And, you know, had to up my knowledge of ABM before I could start the next phase, and also start really serious conversations with you guys at Bias, because obviously you understood the process and, you know, the tech in particular, and I know we're going to talk to that. So yeah, that was another piece of the puzzle before we could get anywhere.
And in terms of selling it internally, Fawn, you've mentioned that a couple of times. For the people listening, and some people are going to be agency side, right? So they're probably not going to have the knowledge and be privy to what goes on. Talk to us about how you sold this into the leadership.
Well, I didn't quite realize what a big deal it would be. And, you know, during my course, Robert did talk a lot about how the success of ABM rides on the buy-in from your leadership. But also, you know, particularly, I had a CEO who wanted to understand everything, every detail. So that was critical for me. So I presented to the leadership several times, to the board, and then there was like a month's worth of questions that had to be fielded from all parties. And, you know, you, Paul, and Bias were kind of integral to that as well. So just to give you an idea of the kind of questions that, you know, came my way. Why is ABM so expensive? How long do I need to wait for results? You know, why do we need to wait so long for results? And, you know, as a side note here, ABM isn't about a fast turnaround. It's a minimum of 4 to 6 months before you start reaping the rewards. It does take investment. And I remember one of the other marketing leaders on the course saying, oh, my CEO told me, here's $2,000, go and do some ABM. And we were all kind of astonished, especially after the intensive course, to be like, that's absolutely impossible. You know, ABM isn't another line item in a budget. It is a fundamental shift in how business does revenue generation. And I think, you know, that kind of cultural shift is a big thing that you have to talk about with your leadership, because if they're not willing to shift that culture, then you don't really have a chance. So, and, you know, a few other questions. Why do we need to use an external agency? Can we bring this in-house? You know, when can we bring it in-house? And why do we need to invest in additional tech? Why are we choosing this particular tech? And what are other options? And I know we're going to dive deeper into that. But, be prepared to answer a lot of questions, have patience. You will answer the same question, a variety of times. Patience is a virtue here. And leadership weren't the only ones that I needed to buy in on this particular strategy. Customer success and sales, particularly sales, were critical. And, I think culturally there can sometimes be a bit of tension between marketing and sales, which I don't really buy into. I know a few sales leaders that do. And this has to disappear for ABM to work. And I'd argue for the business to work. There's sometimes this perception that, marketing is over here building audience and sales is over here doing the very serious work of getting the money. But fundamentally, both teams are working towards the same goal of, driving revenue just through different means. So sales really had to see the rewards of ABM, which are highly interested in qualified leads. The team isn't going to spend all this time doing empty prospecting. There's no more arguing about whether or not the leads that are coming through are good or not. ABM eliminates that. But sometimes sales can be protective of their accounts of leads. So you really have to bring them on this journey and sell the benefits. And, Paul, I think you probably talked to that as well.
Yeah, so we've talked a bit about tech, and the play that we suggested to you was heavily tech reliant. How was that received, considering we were pushing HubSpot and you guys were heavily invested in Salesforce?
That's always a tricky one, right? Because as a marketing leader, for me, it's so much easier if we're all on one platform, right? And, I was really pushing that, but I was like, okay, one battle at a time, right? Just one thing at a time. We can make this work regardless. But I think, you kind of explained to us, I'm recommending Rollworks because you use HubSpot for marketing. And this platform integrates best with HubSpot. So, we really had to listen to that kind of advice. What's going to work best with the systems that we have, and where does marketing lie? If marketing is on HubSpot, then this is where your ABM needs to be focused in terms of tech, because marketing owns ABM, even though, it's kind of a misnomer because it's very much about marketing and sales alignment, and it facilitates sales, and sales is very heavily involved. Marketing owns it. So I would say, it was part of the process.
Yeah. And for us, it was interesting because you were like, the business kept shifting, right? You had 1 minute customer success were on their own platform. Then we migrated them onto Service Hub with arrows. And so now you've got marketing and customer success on the HubSpot technology. We've got the integration to Rollworks. There was a lot of moving parts there. But obviously for us, we were thinking more about the delivery of microsites, which were going to underpin the verticals that we were going through in terms of this account-based process, right? So you had let's think about this: chemicals, energy, financial services, tech, and something else. I can't remember the last one, but what we were looking for was, how do we build a repeatable, scalable process and the technology that HubSpot gave across, Marketing Hub, Service Hub, the CMS, which enabled us to, just copy and clone the original way forward. That was really why we looked at pushing into Rollworks, because you've got demand-based, you've got Sixth Sense, but most of these tools were going to provide a duplication of some of the functionality that HubSpot, offers. And what we were trying to avoid was getting people into over-investing in tech, duplication of tech, when you've got Salesforce sitting in the background, and it was just going to get too messy. So that was really why we went with the Rollworks HubSpot connection in that space.
Yeah, and I think that's appreciated. Obviously, there's not endless budgets anywhere anymore, right? So there's no point in investing in additional tech that you don't need. You really do have to take stock of what you have, how you can use it, and I know we had Zoom Info, but we didn't really know how to connect that to HubSpot when I came in, and I was like, oh, well, if we connect this, and then we have Rollworks and the intent data, and it comes in here. And so it's also how can you optimize what you have in order to facilitate your strategy?
Yeah, and actually, let's just give a nod to that strategy quickly, right? Because top 8,000 companies in the US, I mean, no one would say ABM goes out to 8,000 companies, right? So we were rolling out vertical by vertical, right? And to do this, we had to take a real strong multi-layered ABM approach, right? One to many, one to few, and then if needed, one to one, because the value of what was it, 100K a license for the product.
Yep.
And so you start looking at like, okay, broad target or broad vertical approach gives you the one to many. Whoever we can get to raise their head above the parapet and say, look, we're engaged, roll them into a one to few. And then, if sales are not able to bring that deal to the finish line, then if need be, we were going to roll them into a one-to-one approach, right? So we were going to use all of the ABM approaches in order to close those accounts. So I think it would be sort of good for people to understand that we weren't just focusing on one of them. It was almost like a demand gen into, I'm interested into, well, if we get this far enough and you're not going to be there with us, then we'll put everything into landing this deal. And that was a broad approach, but one that we felt was suitable. And how did you feel about that?
Yeah. And I think it's, you have to say that it's not a one size fits all. You have to see what works for your business. How big is your TAM? Like we had a really big one. So we had to think about, okay, we want to target a lot of accounts. But obviously not all of those can be in one to few or one to one. That's just impossible. So how do we get the greatest amount of accounts? And then if someone needs a bit of extra love, then they can be moved into other approaches. So we had to have a plan for every single approach. What are the criteria, once they get to maybe one to few, and what is their criteria for one to one, and then what kind of content, what kind of ads do they, we had to think about every single approach because of combining all of them. So again, a lot of work, a lot of thinking, quite a lot of research, but we felt that that was the best approach for us to get us where we needed to be, essentially.
Cool. And moving on, because we want to make sure that we cover the questions we've got listed here. We've touched on the time and the investment needed in ABM. What does that actually look like?
Well, I think, obviously we worked with bias. And I think that is the right approach. I don't know of any startups that do any kind of significant ABM without agency support. There is, as you mentioned, just for the ICP research, it was over 100 man hours. It takes an intense amount of resource, especially at the beginning. You kind of have, this condensed time period where you're trying to do a lot of research, and that takes quite a lot of alignment of teams. So there's also that internal thing that's happening. Teams are working together, they're sharing information, you're doing a lot of workshops, you have your research, you have content to build, if you're invested in tech, you're doing, you're onboarding for that, you're learning about that. And it makes sense that you still want your teams to do their day jobs, so you need support. I mean, I wouldn't have just been able to say, right, we're just doing ABM and then that's what we're all going to focus our time on. No, sales team still needs to sell in the meantime, and marketing team still has to do inbound and social and every single other thing that they have to do. So I think it's, a wise investment. If you go alone, you need at the very least an ABM lead. They're managing the process, the tech, their project, managing the whole situation. You need a graphic designer. I mean, no matter which approach you choose, you're going to need a shit ton of ads. And you're going to need a dedicated content resource because there's a lot of content that you're building. Even if you're doing one-to-many and you're reusing a lot of maybe the case studies that you have and, a lot of kind of the resources that you already have and you're kind of upcycling those, you're still going to want fresh content, particularly if you have, redone your messaging and really solidified it, your personas. There's going to be, new stuff that you have to build.
Sure. I was expecting Rob Norum to have joined us by now, so we might have to just continue without him. So just bear with us, guys, just in case he does pop his head up, but he's running sort of about 10 minutes late already. Fawn, we planned for this. Why don't we try and sort of give some background to that experience you had with Rob, and talk about why you felt that even though you had an agency that could support you, you wanted to go and educate yourself.
I mean, Rob's got 30 years in the business. He's been doing ABM forever. I mean, before I heard of it, before you started doing it as an agency, he's probably been there, done it all. And it was also, I think it's important as a leader that you understand what you're doing and what you are, going to the leadership and asking for. This was a significant amount of money that I was asking for to do this. This was new to the business. It required a cultural shift. It was a lot. So I needed to feel secure in that. And I think any leader should. I think you have to remain curious. You have to constantly be learning as a leader. And you don't just throw your team to the wolves on something that, no one understands. You have to give them the best shot. And you have to instill confidence in your leadership that this is the right approach and you know what you're doing. And so I felt that I needed to go and get that information. And, there's not just one voice from an agency, which can often be misconstrued as, well, why don't you just hand us some more money? You know what I mean? So, and that's not the case in this situation, but, your leadership can be asking like that. Okay, so now we have to have external support. Why can't we do this internally? And you really have to be able to explain that to them.
And so one of my favorite things that not a lot of people talk about in ABM is sales enablement. And I hear a lot of people saying, well, marketing own ABM, so why do you have sales enablement? Because what you don't want is like the marketing team driving ABM and the sales team just think it's the wild, wild west of hot leads and just reaching out and, prematurely before we've even scored or identified that these people are the right people at the right time. And so how could an agency better enable that, or how could you feel better enabled to go to your leadership? What could someone like us who may be listening on this call do to enable that for you?
Oh, I think really open and honest communication. I think it's really important to have a clear dialogue with your agency and, outline expectations. But I think, having a playbook, say, and, case studies, if you can, say, this is how it looks. This is what we've done before. Or, we've worked with other people and this is their feedback. So I think, open, clear communication. We won't be afraid to hurt your feelings and you don't be afraid to hurt ours.
Cool. And moving on to the next question. Oh gosh, that's a Robert
I know
question.
These are for Robert and he's not here.
Cool. So look, I feel like maybe the audience might want to throw some questions into the chat. I mean, particularly focused about selling to the leadership and building out strategy internally. If there's any questions there, it would be great to talk to them. Otherwise, we could try and answer some of the questions that we had for Robert. Anyone in the audience got any questions? Let me just see what happened in.
We'll get Robert back for see if he'll come back for the Ask Me Anything on Thursday. That way, everyone can get their questions into Robert. That's absolutely fine. He owes us now.
He definitely does. I want to see if there are any questions. No, there was no questions in the beginning. So let me. Okay. It's unfortunate. Sorry, guys. We were hoping that Robert would be here. But Fawn, look, what would you think the biggest mistakes would be for a business leader, marketing leader in particular, trying to go to the leadership team off the bat and sell ABM? Like, especially in some, like your business had just taken a Series A, right? So there's this big change. Everyone's got money to spend. They're excited. They're pumped. They're feeling confident about all the wrong things, but everyone's pushing in the right direction. So talk about that.
I think, from my perspective, there was the sense that money is not an object here, because this is why we've gotten the Series A. We've come in to invest in sales and marketing, but don't take the piss, right? So that's why you have to be educated and know your stuff. If you're asking for quite a lot of money, you need to know why, and really keep them focused on the big picture, on the outcome. A lot of people don't want to wait. They don't want to wait 6 months. And when I was pitching my strategies, I was like, we're not doing inbound, but that's going to take 6 months. ABM, probably about minimum 4 if we really move our asses and get going. And then again, you still have to have patience, because you have all these questions and this whole process that you need to get through. So, it's a long game, and you have to manage expectations around that.
Cool. And I've just had a question come in from Zaralu. I believe I've said that right. And she's asked, what is an ideal lead conversion rate for an ABM campaign to be labeled as successful? Now, I was just trying to quickly open up the presentation that we had for the business. Now, Sarah, just to come off the bat, I tried when we built the ABM strategy with Fawn. We went off a number of basic principles, right? So typically 1 in 5 accounts will be activated. So we times 5 the number of accounts that we actually wanted to go after per vertical, right? So, let's just say there were a couple of hundred companies per vertical. With an ABM strategy, you can only really target 20 to 25 at any one time, right? But the way that we built the ABM strategy was a little bit different to just traditional ABM only. What we looked at was, if we can only take the top 25 businesses that we felt would be ideal fit, well, then the sales team, we didn't really want them just sitting around doing nothing. So we looked at using intent data, as well as saying to ourselves, well, look, if we are running big air cover, we've got these top 25 accounts that we're trying to activate, but there's potentially 75 to, another 175 accounts that could be targeted in this vertical. It didn't mean that we couldn't say to the sales team, don't try and approach them. But what we had to agree is what an approach would look like. And then once the sales team would have activated one of those companies, we could then enroll them into the top 25 and roll out an account that wasn't showing any interest. So we kind of started to build this always on thing. And then we were using intent data for companies that matched the ICP that were starting to be in play today. So we were looking at things like ESG software as an intent keyword, for example, with Bombora and Rollworks, and targeting those companies, obviously with some air cover, but also with some sales outreach. Now, that hasn't answered your question, and I'll get to that now, because what you're really looking at in total is around a 30% activation rate. Now, without knowing what your traditional sales cycle looks like at your business, I would definitely start to build backwards from there. So if you would say, well, look, if we did really well, we'd activate about 30% of our target accounts. And then you can put into your typical sales cycle, deal velocity, et cetera, and start whittling back true expectations. And then obviously you'd want to build out better than that. But at the same time, those expectations might actually match your revenue goals. And I hope that answers your question. But if it doesn't, obviously on Thursday, we're running those follow-ups. So feel free to do that. And Jesse has said, how long should your initial outreach sequence be? How many touches over what period of time? Now, that's a great question, but it's not a linear one. So what I mean by
it never is.
Is we didn't plan a series of touch points in traditional, like as a traditional marketing strategy, like over inbound, you might say, lead scoring, let's talk about it in that side. It's got to do 14, 15 things and then we're going to say that this is a qualified lead. Because I actually am, as Fawn will tell you, I hate the MQL. I think it's a misnomer as a metric, and I'm not into that. What we were looking at is, how do we believe we could activate someone, and at what point did we believe they became a viable activated account? And so the plan was around 9 touch points, but we were going to be very, very direct, right? And there's some reasons for this, because ESG is a hot topic at the moment, right? So it wasn't like a traditional, very heavily competitive vertical, which might take longer, cloud-based services, fintech solutions, and those types of things. Everyone's clamoring for ESG. They didn't know what platform they should be choosing. The good thing about the platform that Fawn worked at, and sorry we keep saying a platform, but we're actually not supposed to be mentioning it, so I'll just keep talking around it, is that the data that the platform held goes back 10 years, right? So what we were able to do was come up with a strategy that enabled us to use the collected as the focal point of the one-to-many approach, right? So this was the plan, and I'll kind of walk you through it. I'm just sliding through the strategy doc here. Just bear with me, right? So what we came up with was a microsite at a vertical level. Within that microsite, there was a Power BI board which held the data of the trends within ESG for that vertical going back over the last 10 years. There was also going to be a report that was downloadable with industry-specific webinars, case studies. What else did we have in here? The logos of the businesses of that vertical that they already had, relevant links to content they were producing, and then obviously the strong call to action to book a demo. Now that doesn't give you an answer to how many steps in the sequence should be, but I suppose the logical answer is as many as possible, right? Because this isn't like loading someone into a sequence on HubSpot and saying, we're just going to run this outbound stuff at the company or the multiple people within the decision-making committee. And then when someone activates or replies, I've done my job. That is not doing good ABM, right? So realistically, what you're looking at is doing a lot more research. We did 100 hours, but that was just at the company level and the vertical level. Getting into what the decision makers have been doing for the past 6 months, like have they been speaking at events, what have they been posting on the LinkedIn and places like that, and other places where you can find them, starts to give you an idea of how you personalize that outreach, right? So what we did, just to kind of help you, was we went, right, broadly speaking, this vertical, ICP, let's get some air cover built. So there were ads created, and we're running the same strategy here at Bias, right? So if you're an agency, pick up on this, right? So we start running air cover, and then it's whoever starts to engage. That air cover was designed to push decision makers back into those microsites, right? And the reason that worked well was because the microsites can be built on HubSpot. So if you're a HubSpot agency, that works really well. Also, by using Rollworks and HubSpot together, you can dynamically link your target audience to email. So to expand on that, as you identify good fit companies, you use your Zoom info, your Seamless, or whatever that looks like, and then you're pushing the data into your CRM. You can have a dynamic fix into Rollworks, which identifies anyone that you identify as like a prospect or whatever it is that you're using in your CRM. And then you can start targeting those people with their business emails wherever Bombora or Rollworks can find them on any number of amassed websites out there, for example, chiefinformationofficer.com or something like that. You're also able to target those people at their domain, and they are able to target on your behalf, but to anonymize data. Now, the reason that we like Rollworks is because of like today's feature release that they've just done. If you have let's just say you've got your decision-making board within your CRM at a company level, you HubSpot set up for ABM. you're now able to de-anonymize as long as you've got the customer record in your CRM. So if there were 5 people or 8 people, if any of those 8 people were anonymized to you, they will now serve you and say, on today, you've had a spike and it was this person from that company that was on any of these pages in your microsite, right? So there were reasons that we were doing this. So, and then logically, you're trying to make sure that people, start to engage with the data, download the forms, register for the webinars, and start measuring that performance. So your task, in short, is to, depending on the size of your TAM, but if it's a broad TAM like we're talking about, is to push people from being in a really wide, open, addressable market into a narrower space where you can start to see, are we serving them the right content from an ad perspective? But then also, this is where the salespeople can roll in, is you can use outbound at this point, right? Because don't be shy to kind of say, look, we know this is a good fit for you. And do you want to see this data? Do you want this report? Blah, 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 and so on and so forth. So it all
sorry, Paul, to interrupt, to touch on Zara's second question there. We did rely on Rollworks. They do send emails to your team that says, this is spiking, this is super hot account, your sales name needs, they would send them to particular, either your sales leader, they could be sent to people on your sales team to say, these accounts are hot now and you should talk to them. And then you can see what they've been up to and how they kind of prioritize what's hot. And also we had our ICP list that was for ABM. And then the sales team also had other accounts that they could reach through outbound that were not on that they were kind of more like tier 2 for us, so that they could still go off and talk to people. But anything that was in that kind of ABM bubble was off limits until the technology said, right, go.
Yeah, and I think just to come in on the back end of that, I talked about it just now in my long speech, sorry about that. But I talked about it in terms of, ABM isn't about lead scoring. And obviously when you're doing inbound or demand gen, you're lead scoring people in the CRM, and you've got to come away from that mindset of a per person lead score and look at an account activation, right? Because, you're going to find your champion and that's one person. But what you're trying to do is activate multiple people so that the company is becoming aware of you, and you're starting to draw multiple visits from different people to the website, to your microsite, landing page, whatever it is that you're using to funnel these people in. That's what you want to be doing. And then you're looking at the number of people that you can activate and the conversations you can have. Now, we were looking at our metrics just now, and I just want to come back to those because we wanted a 30% activation rate, which is a good industry activation rate. We were looking to have at least one meeting booked with a sales team per activated account. We had a minimum revenue target of 4 million. So we had to activate or generate pipeline of a minimum 40 accounts. But that was going to be the easy part because of the combined outbound ABM and inbound intent. And then we looked at penetration of around 45%. We want 15% of the total count. So if you're thinking that we wanted to activate 30, at least 50% of the 30 would be visiting landing pages, microsites, whichever. Out of the total number of accounts that the company were going after, that represented around 120 businesses. And we were looking for around 3 to 6 page views broadly across the microsite, but also the company page, right? So there wasn't a pricing page on their website, or there still isn't. There was a product page, there's a book a demo form. And so if we're driving people into a microsite and not the main website, we were looking for how much activity there was activated within that. So, how long were they on the data page? Did they download the report for their industry off the back of that? Did they sign up to see the recorded webinar? Did they look at any of the other content there? Did they come into the main site and then look at the product page? And then did they hit the book of demos? So there's all these things that you're looking for to happen around the delivery of the campaign, and then you're scoring at that account level because you're trying to activate a company and not a person. And I hope that gave you some background there. Happy to dive into this more on office hours, which we've got Thursday, and please do come back. We'd love to see you there, but also join us for deep dive into one-to-one, one-to-few and one-to-many, which are rolling out consecutive weeks. We're going to get more into the tech, more into the strategy, and so you're going to start to see how this unwinds, how you might want to take that away and think about how would you sell it to your version of Fawn, or maybe if you're Fawn and you're on this call, maybe how you would follow up and sell it to your leadership. I'm going to try and get Fawn back for AMAs. Fawn, is that available to us with you?
We'll see.
Okay. And then, yeah, guys, look, we're going to try and put this recording up as quick as possible. But look, please come back. Love to see you here. You can get me at paul@biasdigital.com. I'm happy to answer any ABM questions you've got. Feel free to download our ABM 101. We've got a ton of information in the ebook. It's not one of those fluffy things where there's 8 pages and it just says you can do this and you can do that. There's like strategic advice, what you should be doing in what week, how you should apply yourself. Like, we've gone in and given you the recipe. You really should get in there. Let me see if I can quickly get that link for you now. We've made it actually available so that you don't have to sign up for it unless you think there's some quality information in there. So hopefully there's the link. The book's going to be coming up straight away. You can read it. You only have to swap your details if you want to take that away, and hopefully that gives you some information. But please come back, tell your friends, and we would love to see you here on another ABM hub, because it is
ABM month at Bias.
Brilliant. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Appreciate you coming, and that is a wrap. Thanks, guys. Thanks
Take
again.
care.